Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm doing a double book review. These books are both books that I picked up this year because these authors were both nominated for the Astounding Award for Best New Writer, one of the not a Hugo categories at the Hugo Awards. And that was one of the categories that I decided I was going to focus on reading this year, a year in which I was not enthused by the best novel shortlist and decided not to read several of the nominated best novels. So these two books are Godkiller by Hannah Kaner and These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs. Both of these authors were in their second year of eligibility this year. These were both debut novels that have sequels out already, but I have not read any of the sequels yet. I only had time to read one book from each nominated author for the Astounding Award this year. My review of Godkiller is much shorter than my review of These Burning Stars. I was not intending to write a full review for this book. I ended up doing it because I got to the end of the book and really wasn't sure what I wanted to rate it, and then the process of writing the review helped me figure out that this was a 3-star book for me. This is a pretty generic fantasy adventure story and start to a trilogy, but it's done competently for a debut. The 3 human protagonists are recognizable archetypes, and when circumstances throw them together, they team up on a journey to a forbidden, abandoned city of the gods to seek magical solutions to their problems. Kissin, the professional god killer of the title, is a hardened fighter with a tragic past and a heart of gold. Elagast is a former knight who's left it all behind to become a small-town baker. And Inara is a very special, magical young girl in need of protection and guidance after her noble family's home is attacked. The 4th POV character, Skediseth, is a small god of white lies to whom Inara is mysteriously bound. Neither of them know how or why, and they're looking to break the tie. Skedi is like talking critter friend shaped, and he has the fewest chapters. I liked that we had his POV, but I would have liked either to have a little more of it or for it to feel a little more inhuman or something. The way in which the multitudes of gods function as both magical creatures and as objects of faith is the most distinctive element in a fairly generic fantasy setting, and I'd have liked for them to be a bit stranger. I liked all the human characters well enough, but I felt like I really could have loved Skediseth if the author had just done a little more of something with him. I think the book title and the description are a little misleading because they give the impression that the book is mostly going to be about Kissin, and it just isn't. Sure, she's the first of the protagonists that we meet, and it is super handy in this world to have someone who specializes in fighting gods on your team. But Inara is right there giving Chosen One vibes. And Elagast is also right there on a secret quest to save the life of the nation's king, with whom he shares a deep personal history. In comparison, Kissin's feelings of responsibility toward Inara just don't have that much plot weight. That's not a problem per se, but it could feel a bit like a bait and switch. There's also a tiny bit of a romance, which honestly I could have done without. I started out thinking of this book as a generic 3-star read, but was gradually more impressed through the midsection all the way up until the final confrontation. The plot and characters all felt plausible, but more than that, I felt like Hannah Kaner was setting some thematic groundwork that I'd be interested in following through the rest of the series. The story takes place in a land that has been devastated by gods who demanded horrible sacrifices of their worshippers, and ultimately fought each other in a catastrophic war. In the wake of this war, the new king has banned all worship of gods, powerful and harmless alike, and his knights punish people for even minor infractions. There's an obvious metaphor for real-world freedom of religion here, weighed against the ways in which religious differences drive conflict. I worried that this was going to be poorly handled, but I thought it was mostly treated with a light touch. Then there's some observations later in the book about the relationships between faith and power, and between gods and their worshippers that I thought were worthwhile. Still, I found the final climax of the book to be formulaic and emotionally unsatisfying. The plot twist is predictable and awkwardly revealed. There's a lot of mustache twirling from the villains to give them time to monologue to the heroes. Everyone thinks they are going to die, and then somehow they don't. What a surprise. 3 stars, but this might have earned 4 for me if I'd read it just a couple years ago or in a more generous mood. And I'm kind of still inclined to read book 2 since it was also included in this year's Hugo voter packet. The author I rated much more highly on my Astounding Award ballot was Bethany Jacobs, author of These Burning Stars. This is an exciting space opera debut that I would recommend for fans of Yoon Ha Lee's Machineries of Empire series, and perhaps to a slightly lesser extent, Anne Leckie's Imperial Ratch. It's the sort of evil space empire book where the author trusts you to recognize that it's an evil space empire, and at the same time to be able to find characters within that system compelling. It's got a fast-moving primary plot with a significant amount of time spent on flashbacks that develop the reader's understanding of what's happening in the present at a carefully calculated rate. And it's fun to read despite its serious themes, a balance that many science fiction writers strive for, and not all can get quite right. The world building is complex enough that I was glad for the maps in the beginning of the book that showed not only the planets of the Empire's 3 star systems, but also their ruling families and primary gods. The Empire, called the Kingdom, hence the series title, governs with a religious mandate and trains up-and-coming government agents and officials together in specialized schools before funneling them into one of 3 branches of government. But the ruling families of each star system belong to a different power structure of inherited wealth and influence, one with which the kingdom government must always be striking a balance to ensure effective rule. This world building fell apart for me a little around the edges whenever I started to question how the system was supposed to actually function under normal circumstances. Given that the book is following abnormal events, it might simply not be worth the page space to explain. Jacobs opts to hit the ground running with the story. No complaints of excess info dumping to be had here. But while info dumping is much derided by reviewers these days, and there is certainly a skill in wrangling a complicated new world onto the page without bogging the reader down in it, it can also be a matter of personal preference. For myself, I would have actually appreciated a bit of info dump here to fill in some of the gaps in my understanding. 2 of our 3 POV characters are members of the clericy, the religious branch of government. But I'm not totally sure what role the clerics in this world are actually supposed to play in day-to-day governance. Essek, the first POV character we meet in flashback, and we only ever get her POV in flashback, is decidedly not a normal cleric. She came to kingdom service from one of the powerful ruling families and never truly gave up her knightfoot allegiances. She is brilliant, violent, not particularly pious, and uses her position of authority to mete out extrajudicial punishments as she sees fit. Good thing you're not supposed to like her. In short, though, Essek behaves in almost every way like one of the Cloak-san, the assassin soldiers of the kingdom, except that she answers to the first cleric. We see the Cloaks throughout the book engaging in these high-stakes covert operations, but it's unclear to me the extent to which they're meant to be either a military or a civilian police force on a regular basis. The third branch of the kingdom government are the secretaries, who are seemingly the judicial branch, maybe also the lawmakers. I was a bit unclear on this. We don't see much of them in this book, and there is some wry commentary about how bad things happen when the other 2 branches of government do things without them. Our second POV character, Chono, is also a cleric, and one who we gather has had a much more normal career than Essek, despite being one of her proteges. But we don't hear much about what she actually does in that job, which she is pulled away from at the beginning of the book to shadow Essek on a high-stakes mission for the first cleric. We only learn that she feels she's serving her community in this role and that she is beloved by that community. Being pulled back into Essek's orbit forces Chono to re-examine all of her values and loyalties. Chono is perhaps a more profoundly moral character than anyone else in the book, but she is torn in many directions. She has personal loyalties to both Essek and the first cleric for being mentors who gave her all the opportunities she's had in life. But both relationships are strained by Chono's righteous beliefs, which aren't shared by any of the major power players she crosses paths with. Her relationship with Essek is particularly fraught with years of shared history and secrets, many of which have to do with Essek's decades-long rivalry with Chono's mysterious former kin-school classmate and friend, a prodigy known only as Six. Secretly the descendant of a man officially held responsible for the horrific genocide of a minority ethnic and religious group, the Bethany. I know, that's a lot to take in. But despite Six being the obvious third leg of the Essek-Chono relationship, and in some ways the most important character in the whole book, they aren't the third POV character. Instead, we get June, who's a genius caster, sort of a programmer hacker, but with technology that's described so vaguely it feels more like magic, who bites off more than she can chew when she gets her hands on a memory coin pertaining to the Nightfoot family that's carrying a much bigger secret than what she had expected. Our other protagonists may be chasing June across the Empire trying to get their hands on the memory coin, but Chono is convinced from Essek's behavior that the chase is inevitably going to lead them to Six. But where is Six? How are they involved, and what do they want? The other related mystery is of Essek's motivations in the present timeline, where we don't get chapters from her POV, only Chono's observations of her often erratic behavior. Essek must be playing some game here, and it must have something to do with Six, right? If the mystery of Six and Essek is one gravitational pull of the story, the other is the plight of the surviving Bethany, who live under the dubious and limited protection of the kingdom, mostly working in an industry run by the Nightfoot clan. Theirs is the resistance against the evil empire that a genre-savvy reader will be expecting from the start. But the ways in which our cast of characters become entangled in said resistance movement may still surprise. The second book in this series has been available for a while at the time I'm posting this review, but I haven't heard much very specific about it, so I wonder, with all of the plot twists of These Burning Stars revealed by the end of the book, what new mysteries can Jacobs weave into this story to keep us on the edge of our seats in book 2? So I finished both of these books thinking that, yeah, I'll read the second book in that series. I hope I do. I hope I read the sequels to both of these books. I don't yet own or have my hands on, in any way, a copy of the second book in this series. I think that's On Vicious Worlds. And this is the one that left me more excited to pick up the sequel. So I don't know how I'm prioritizing any of this. I'm terrible at following through on reading sequels, as you may well know. But let me know if you've read either of these books. Let me know if you've read the second books in either of these series, and if so, whether I should prioritize them or not. Anyhow, I hope you're having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.